Welcome to Dadograms. Today I'm going to teach you about being brainwashed, how it's done, and how not to let it happen to you. I'm going to teach it to you the same way that I learned it in the Navy because, believe it or not, it's something they teach all of us Navy pilots. Now, I'm Jason M. Garrett, a retired Navy commander and pilot, and I created Dadograms to teach my children and all of you how to win in life. And that also means that I have to teach you how not to lose. The other night, my family and I were watching the TV show Tracker. In this episode, the villain was called the Teacher. Now, he had this eerie ability to brainwash young men, convincing them to do his bidding without question. The next day, my son turned to me, a little worried about the episode, and asked, "Dad, is it really that easy to brainwash people?" Next thing you know, I was doing what I do, telling him what I know, just like I do in all of my Dadograms. So here's what I told him. Right after I earned my wings of gold as a Navy pilot, the military sent me to specialized training. In that training, we learned how people are brainwashed and, more importantly, how to prevent ourselves from being brainwashed. They told us a story of some of our POWs from the Korean War. When American soldiers were captured, they were taken to prisoner of war camps. There, they were subjected to brutal treatment, torture, isolation, psychological manipulation. And when the war finally ended, something shocking happened. 21 American POWs chose to stay in North Korea. They didn't want to come home. They wanted to defect. The U.S. government was stunned. Why would our young American men, raised with freedom, democracy, and everything the U.S. stands for, decide to remain with their captors? President Eisenhower himself was so furious about this that he ordered an in-depth study to figure out what had happened. And the findings were chilling. The study found that brainwashing wasn't some mystical force or magic trick. It was a systematic process that could be performed on people. And while many people are resistant to it, some people are very, very susceptible to it. Here's what they found. The ones who were successfully brainwashed had common traits. First, they came from broken homes. Second, they had no strong father figure. And 3, they lacked a solid education. They were already searching for something, whether that was security, structure, or purpose. And the North Koreans and the Chinese who they were working with gave it to them. Admittedly in their own very twisted way, but they did in fact give it to them. And this is how they did it. First, they isolated them. The captors isolated the prisoners from each other, breaking down any sense of unity. I mean, think about it. They couldn't talk to each other, so they couldn't reinforce what they knew to be the truth. And after a while, they broke down. Next, their captors controlled all the information they received. The POWs were only given one version of the truth, which just so happened to be the enemy's version of the truth. No outside sources were available, no counter-arguments, and as they were isolated, there was no talking amongst themselves, just a steady and relentless dose of propaganda. And over time, it started to crowd out what they thought they knew and believed. Then there are small concessions that lead to big concessions. The enemy didn't start out by asking their prisoners to betray their country. That would have been too abrupt. It wouldn't have worked. They started out by taking small steps. For instance, having a POW write a seemingly harmless essay about how America wasn't perfect. Then, maybe later, they'd have them sign a statement admitting that the U.S. had made mistakes in the war. Step by step by step, the captors built a bridge toward surrendering their ideology. Then there's the carrot and the stick concept, reward and punishment. Prisoners who cooperated would get better treatment. Perhaps they'd be rewarded with more food, more water, medical aid. Those who resisted were punished, perhaps being denied those very same things. The brainwashing process wasn't just mental manipulation, it was tied to their survival. This was no doubt a very difficult process to go through. And if they weren't really resilient, if they weren't really firm in their beliefs, then they were in fact swayed into believing what the enemy was telling them. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wow, that's interesting. Thanks for the history lesson. But what the hell does that have to do with me? After all, you're certainly no prisoner of war, right? Well, the truth is, brainwashing isn't just something that happens in war zones. It happens today in our everyday lives in ways we often don't even realize it's happening. You see it in political groups, gun rights groups, hate groups, churches, schools, and on and on. And there are so many different ways that these groups can reach out and influence the masses and sway those that are most susceptible to being brainwashed. Consider social media and news networks. If a person belongs to a specific type of social media group or only listens to specific news outlets, they're only hearing one side of the story, whatever side that is. And if that's the case, then they are at risk of being manipulated. When they only consume information that aligns with their existing beliefs, they're not being informed, they're being conditioned. Like in political campaigns that craft highly targeted content, ensuring that their supporters only see the news that reinforces their existing views, making them even more zealous in their beliefs. I think that's why we have such polarized political parties nowadays. And these groups are often ideological echo chambers. Ever notice how some online communities and activist groups discourage questioning of any kind? If a person doesn't agree with them 100%, then, well, they're the enemy. These followers are being isolated. This is how racism is often passed down within families, by having beliefs reinforced in the home and by cutting off exposure to differing perspectives. And how about small concessions? Just like the POWs, many people are pressured into agreeing with something small just to fit into a group. How many times have you seen groups pressuring their members to give money? I hate to say it, but I've seen it in churches where small prayer groups get together, then find some member of the group has a financial need. Then they pass the hat, and next week they pass it again, always needing more and more each successive week. You can't be the one that doesn't put money in like everybody else, so you keep giving. And you're supposed to feel good about it because you're helping someone in need. And I've seen this in politics. When you're pressured to give just a small campaign contribution at first, then a little bit more the next time. They know everyone likes to be part of a winning team, so they use that. Once you've given, they keep pressuring you to give more and more and more so you and your team can win. Until one day, you're fully invested in these groups and their beliefs, even though you really haven't critically examined what the hell they stand for. This happens with all kinds of extremist groups, starting with casual exposure, then small actions, then full immersion. And then there's the carrot and the stick idea, reward and punishment. Ever see people get canceled, doxxed, or publicly shamed for questioning a popular narrative? That's a punishment system designed to keep people in line. Meanwhile, those who conform are rewarded with social approval, likes, followers. Many who are deeply entrenched in political movements or hate groups fear questioning their beliefs because of the personal and social costs of doing so. Now, let me be clear. I am certainly not saying that being a member of a church or a political group or the NRA means that you've been brainwashed. Not at all. I'm not even implying that these groups are trying to brainwash anyone. But what I am saying is that these groups and many other zealous groups out there do use these tools when they communicate with their members. They do it because they find it an effective way to raise money, increase membership, or just get their message out. Most folks just find it annoying, irritating, even offensive. But those who are susceptible to being brainwashed and radicalized, well, it happens. They're out there, and that's what I want you to know about. So now that you know it can happen, I'm going to inoculate you from it being able to ever happen to you. If you listen to what I say next, you'll never be able to be brainwashed. And I'll teach you how to protect yourself just like they taught us in the Navy. First, seek out opposing views. You've got to be well informed of and be able to consider all sides of any argument. If you only watch one news source, tune into an alternative source. If you're in an ideological group, listen to a well-reasoned argument from the other side. Challenge your beliefs regularly. That's so important. Challenge what you think you know always. Like they encourage us in the Navy, have a questioning attitude. Next, think critically. Ask yourself, who benefits from me believing whatever it is they're saying? Always question the motives behind the messages you receive. The more you do this, the more alarming it can be when you find out who's been pulling your strings. But once you know, you can cut those strings for good. Next, maintain strong personal connections. The POWs who resisted brainwashing had strong family ties and a solid sense of self. They kept the faith in their families and their shared values, and that was invaluable. Remember, the POWs who stayed were consistently from broken homes. Stay connected to people who ground you. That means really being involved and engaged in their lives and vice versa. And that's getting really hard these days as we all lift our devices to our face and tune out the real live human beings right there present in our lives. Next, be wary of emotional manipulation. If someone's trying to make you react with pure emotion, whether that's fear, anger, alarm, outrage, take a pause. Step away from whatever it is you're listening to and clear your mind. That's a classic manipulation tactic. Don't fall for it. And finally, don't be afraid to stand alone. It's okay to go against the crowd. Heck, I do it all the time. If you're punished for questioning something, that doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're thinking. Be brave enough to hold on to your independent thought. It's not easy nowadays. It takes an inner strength, but you can do it. Self-confidence and self-reliance are absolutely key here. So the scariest thing about brainwashing isn't that it happens, it's how it's done to us in so many different ways in this highly connected world we live in. My son asked me, is it really that easy to brainwash people? And the answer is, yeah. At least to some degree, depending on the character of the person. And as we look inwardly at our devices, it gets easier every day. But not for you. Not for you, thankfully. Because now you know what to watch for and how to handle it. When I was a kid watching cartoons in the 1980s, I always liked to watch G.I. Joe. Great action and great wisdom. At the end of every episode, he taught you something important, and then he would always say, now you know. And knowing is half the battle. And that's absolutely right. Now you know. You have the tools to guard yourself and those you care about against being brainwashed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you've listened all the way through this, I want to encourage you to listen to the previous Dadogram. It is closely related to this topic as I tell you the truth about the news you watch and how to use it to your advantage. All right, so don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit that thumbs up, and all that cool stuff. Until the next Dadogram, stay skeptical, stay smart, and do your own thinking. Good luck to all of you.